Greetings, YouTube. The doctor is in. Dr. Urias Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And today we are going to be talking about the spell Earthquake, 8th level spell. This is the legacy version that's up here right now. We're going to be looking at how it compares to the 2024 version. We are going to be looking at the differences. We're going to be looking at our rating that we originally gave this. We're going to be giving the new rating out, and we're also going to be looking at the effects this has on objects and what rules they may or may not have changed about objects in the 2024 version of Dungeons and Dragons. And that's a big deal because the rules for objects were always kind of murky. And they have expanded them a little bit, but they are not as clear as they are in some other game systems. So we're going to go over all that. Lots to do, lots to see. Don't go anywhere and stay tuned. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or a comment. And don't forget to hit that notification bell and share this video. All right, here is the legacy version of Earthquake. Back in the day, we gave this spell a B. There were a couple of reasons why we gave it a B. And they were mainly because the GM or the DM had a lot of control over how this spell went down. There were a lot of random effects, and also because it was such a huge area. So that was a limiting factor in when and how you could use this. Okay, so it is an 8th level spell. It takes an action. It has a range of 500 feet, which is massive. It has a verbal component, which is worthless, so we don't have to worry about it. Did last for a minute, required concentration. It was usable by clerics, druids, and sorcerers, but not wizards for some reason. And in a 100-foot radius centered on a point that you choose within 500 feet, so that you can see, that's an important one, you shake the ground and structures that are in contact with the ground. So the ground becomes difficult terrain automatically. Each creature in that area that is concentrating must make a Constitution saving throw, or they lose their concentration. And then, in addition, when you cast a spell and at the end of each of your turns that you concentrate on the spell, each creature had to make a dexterity saving throw or it was knocked prone. So those were all pretty good. Those are not bad. The big thing that I had a problem with here was the fissure. So fissures open throughout the spell area at the start of your next turn after you cast the spell. So not the turn you cast the spell, but the next turn. There's a total of 1 to 6 of them. That's random. And then they go down in a place where the GM chooses. So that also seems random-ish. Each one is basically 10 to 100 feet deep, 10 feet wide, and they extend from one edge to the other edge of the area, that 100-foot radius. Area. So a creature standing in the spot where a fissure opens is going to make a dex save or it falls in. So it could take up to 10d10 damage. I mean, that's actually quite a bit, and it'll be stuck there. These don't close. So they only open once, and then they're done, and then that's it. If they open beneath a structure, then the structure takes 50 points of damage in contact in the ground in an area when you cast the spell and at the start of each of your turns till the spell ends. So every turn, structures take 50 points of damage. And if the structure drops to 0, it collapses. If a creature is within half the distance of the structure's height, so if the structure was 50 feet high, anything within 25 feet's got to make a dex save, or it takes 5d6 bludgeoning damage, is knocked prone, and it's buried. The GM can adjust the DC higher or lower depending on the nature of the rubble. On a successful save, the creature takes half damage and doesn't fall prone or become buried. So it doesn't really say a lot about fissures in here, but a fissure that opens beneath a structure causes it to automatically collapse. So regardless of how much damage it takes, it immediately collapses. All right, so that is the base spell. Let's take a look at the new version, and the new version is quite a bit different. It has essentially the same mechanic, the same kind of flavor, but there are a few different mechanics. Still an 8th level spell, still 1 action, still range 500 feet, still a worthless material component, so we don't need to worry about that. Lasts for a minute, it's concentration. It's now transmutation instead of evocation, and it is still usable by clerics, druids, and sorcerers, but not wizards. So again, you choose a point that you can see, and for the duration, an intense tremor rips through the ground in a 100-foot radius circled on the center of the point. And the ground there is automatically difficult terrain, and then they give us this little hyperlink that says what difficult terrain is. When you cast this spell, and at the end of each of your turns for the duration, each creature on the ground in the area makes a dex saving throw. 1 save now, not 2. Before it was a dex save and a con save. Now it's only a dex save. On a failed save, the creature has the prone condition. Camera is moving there. The creature has the prone condition, and its concentration is broken. 1 save now, not 2, and it's a dex save, which is harder to make than that con save. Before it was a dex save and it fell prone, and a con save and it lost constitution. Now we got 1 save, which is a way better, way better. So I'm good with that. So that's the first big giant change. So in my opinion, that moves this spell from a B up to at least a B+. Now, fissures. A total of 1d6, so that's still random. 1d6 fissures open in the spell's area at the end of your turn you cast it. Not at the end of the next turn now, but at the end of your turn. So if we go back to this one, fissures open throughout the area at the start of your next turn after you cast the spell. So a round later, with this one, they open in the spell's area at the end of the turn you cast. So you cast the spell, and at the end of the turn, fissures come up. You choose the fissures location. So the DM is no longer choosing them. You choose them. However, they cannot be under structures. So the thing about the structures immediately collapsing is gone. That's just completely gone. So that's not great, but the fact that you can choose these is awesome. So each fissure is 1d10 times 10 feet, so 10 to 100 feet and 10 feet wide, and extends from one edge to the other. Creature still has to make the dex save, or it falls in. Creature that successfully saves goes with the fissure's edge. So the big thing here is you choose. You choose. So you could choose, if you rolled a 6, you could choose 6 fissures that appear between underneath enemies, and a bunch of them are probably going to fall in it. Okay, so the tremor deals 50 points of damage to any structure in contact with the ground in the area when you cast a spell, and at the end of each of your turns until the spell ends. So right off the bat, when you cast a spell, all the structures to any structure. So it's going to deal 50 points of damage to any structure in contact with the ground. And then at the end of your turn, it's going to do another 50 points of damage. And we're going to talk about objects because it's a little bit murky and ambiguous as to how many hit points objects have. But it says if a structure drops to 0 hit points, it collapses. A creature within a distance of the collapsing structure equal to half the distance, the structure's height. Again, it's 50 feet high. Then anything within 25 feet must make a dexterity saving throw. If it's 100 feet high, that's 50 feet. If it's 10 feet high, that's 5 feet. So on a failed dex save, the creature takes 12d6 bludgeoning damage, has the prone condition, and is buried in rubble, requiring a DC 20 strength athletics check. As an action to escape on a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage only. Now, this is another big change right here. 12d6 bludgeoning damage. Let's remember, it was 5d6 bludgeoning damage before. Now it is, and there it is right there, 5d6. Now it is 12d6 damage. So that's a big adjustment. So we've got fissures open now. We got the one saving throw. That's a plus. The fissures open up immediately at the end of your turn, not the next turn. So that's a plus. You get to choose where they go. That's a plus. And it's 12d6 damage. That's a plus. But they took away the fissures underneath the building. So I would say with this spell now that I would give this a solid A. I definitely would give this a solid A. This seems like a great spell that is just going to wreck a combat, particularly if it's outside. Not sure if I would cast this inside of a cave. There is some considerations to be made with that. Now let's talk a little bit about objects, because it says it does 50 bludgeoning damage to any structure. So we've got a section in here called Breaking Objects, and it's got a list of, and this is in the player's handbook in the glossary. And we've got a list of objects, ACs, and then they give us this thing about hit points, and they give us some objects that have hit points. So goes from tiny bottle, small chest, medium, like barrel, large cart, dining table, and they give hit points for fragile and resilient objects. So if it's like a really sturdy cart, it'll have 27 hit points. But a cart's like 10-foot cube. So think that anything with that's sturdy with a 10-foot cube has around 25 to 27 hit points. Again, they don't really define this very well. They just give you some examples. And if I would say that's something that's made out of wood, I would say if it's made out of stone, it might have twice as many hit points. Or they also talk about this damage threshold, which they don't really define very well. So it says a creature or an object that has a damage threshold has immunity to all damage unless it takes an amount of damage from a single attack or effect equal to or greater than its damage threshold. So, and then it says, for example, an object has a damage threshold of 10. The object takes no damage if 9 damage is dealt to it, since that damage fails to exceed the threshold. If the same object is dealt 11 damage, it takes all the damage. So it is very possible that, a stone wall could have 25 hit points per 5-foot or 10-foot part of it, and then a damage threshold of an equal amount. So if you're doing 26 points of damage, then it will do all the damage and it will collapse it. Again, none of this is defined. It is up to the GM. Now, if we go to the DM's toolbox in the new Dungeon Master's Guide, it's got hit points for doors as another example. So we've got a stone door here that has 40 hit points. Again, that is basically a 5-foot square. That is like a foot wide. So that is another thing that you can use to talk about this. Lastly, we've got this section in Bastions, which talks about defensive walls, but it doesn't really say anything about the hit points of the walls or the objects. It just says that if you get an attack in the Bastion events, it reduces by 2 the number of dice rolled to determine how many Bastion defenders are lost. So that really doesn't say anything at all. You would have to really work that out as to what Earthquake is going to do in these instances where you're casting Earthquake underneath structures. I would say that an Earthquake would probably take a building that is a story tall, stone or wood, doesn't matter, and it's going to wreck it in one round. I would say that reinforced buildings like defensive towers, things like that. Maybe that would take 2 rounds to wreck those. Bigger structures may take more, but that's kind of the rule of thumb that I would use. But again, it's up to you. It's something to think about. But again, this is a great spell. I like what they have changed with it, and I am giving an A. And that's what I got for everybody today. And I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch everybody later.